All right, well, welcome everyone to the Kendo UI R2 2018 release webinar. My name is John Bristow, and on behalf of my colleagues, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar featuring Kendo UI. I'm a member of the developer relations team at Progress, and I have some people here, some lovely people who are joining me, so I'll let them introduce themselves, starting with Alyssa.
Hey, I'm Alyssa Nykel. I'm the Angular developer advocate for Kendo UI.
Hi, I'm Tara Manisic, and I work on React and Vue for Kendo UI.
Hi everybody, I'm Carl Bergenham and I'm the product manager for Kendo UI.
So if you have any complaints or praise, you direct it to this man here. So this is the guy you want to talk to. So where you're joining us from, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. We're going to be going through everything that's new in the R2 2018 release. Before we begin, I would like to go through some housekeeping items. The first thing to mention is the theme for this webinar or for this release is basically building a modern UI for web apps with now support for chatbots, which is actually pretty interesting. We'll be talking about that in a second. And so as you're thinking about building out applications, you can start to consider the wide range of opportunities that are out there for you as a web developer, building out Kendo UI-based applications that incorporate chat-based technologies. Another thing worth mentioning is, of course, because we're doing this live, sometimes things happen with people's internet. Connections go down.
Never.
Don't worry, don't worry. We're going to be recording this and putting it up on our channel, which is at youtube.com/Telerik. So this should go up live relatively soon, and you can go and check that out afterwards. In addition, we're going to be also answering your questions both live through the Q&A pane in GoToWebinar, as well as on Twitter through the hashtag #HeyKendoUI. So if you have any questions, make sure to post them there, and we'll do our best to answer them throughout this webinar. Now, one of the things we're trying to do is encourage people to ask good questions, and so we're going to be giving away a pair of Bose Q35 headless headphones, or sorry, wireless headphones, not headless. And we'll be using that as an incentive for you to ask your good questions. All right, so these are some of the top highlights that are worth mentioning for the R2 2018 release. And so what I'd like to do is turn things over to Carl, and he's going to speak to a few of those items.
Yeah, sure thing. So something that everybody will see across the board is conversational UI. That's a component that we decided to create really across all the product lines, including the ones on the traditional Telerik side, right? A lot of the .NET components. But you see that in jQuery, Angular, React, and Vue as well. I know you'll be talking a little bit more about that, John, as we go down the webinar, so I won't bore everybody with the details there. But then to focus on the jQuery side of things, we decided to implement the most requested component, the DropDownTree. I'm very excited about this because a lot of people have been asking for it. I think it had like 600, almost 700 votes in our feedback portal, so that's pretty significant. And this, just as a quick overview, it's just a drop-down component. Then inside of it, you have our tree view. And this just gives you that power of not necessarily displaying the hierarchical data all over your application, the UX, and just kind of hiding that in the drop-down for a quick selection. We also decided to go even further with our OData support. So we now support dealing with OData v4 completely across the board. I know that's been a request here and there for a feature just from, hey, this aspect of OData, that aspect of OData. But now I'd like to consider ourselves completely supporting OData v4, which is a big deal. And then we also wanted to really ride this wave of a lot of the cloud services that people are connecting into, right? So we saw from Build and Google I/O and a lot of other of these conferences that have been happening recently that cloud services are a big deal. So as a part of this, we decided that, hey, let's take a look at what we can do from our Kendo UI components, either hook into that from retrieving data or just interacting with them in some way. So
yeah, a lot of people have questions about how do I do X, Y, and Z, and so one of the things we've done is made sure we flesh that out, give you some boilerplate code, and so that you can get started quickly.
These are great because they have step-by-step instructions, not just from how to connect it into, let's say, a Kendo UI grid, but also what to do in the interfaces for each one of these services. So Azure, going through setting everything up there through the Azure interface, and then what you need to do in the Kendo UI side. So really comprehensive guidelines alongside with the boilerplate.
What are we doing around Angular?
Yeah, so on the Angular side, we, of course, mentioned conversational UI already. Sure. But a big thing that came out with this release is support for Angular v6. I know that's kind of timely in terms of our release, Angular v6 dropping at the same time. And we wanted to, of course, make sure that we had full support going forward. So that means that if you're currently upgrading to Angular v6, or if you're just working with v6 out of the box, just doing a brand new application, you can work with the Kendo UI components in Angular.
Was there a lot of work that had to be done to get that supported?
So there were a couple of things that we had to do this time around. It was a little bit easier with 5, but with 6, there were a couple of things that were upgraded from the Angular framework perspective. So RxJS, for example, got upgraded to 6, and there had some incompatibility with 5. So because we try to support people, of course, going back if you're not necessarily on the latest and greatest, we just had to do some work to make sure that we can make folks dealing with Angular 5 still productive, while, of course, serving 6.
Great.
So we have some documentation articles just around some, hey, keep a lookout for this when you're upgrading to help out with that.
Okay, cool.
And of course, we have new components. So we have the toolbar component, which is useful by itself and also sets us up for being able to create some other components go down the line that uses the toolbar. We have the menu component, which a lot of people have been asking for. The tooltip component, which might seem like a minor thing when you just look at, hey, it's just a tooltip. But honestly, it's one of the most used components that we have. People love either using it on its own or potentially integrating into our other components. That's great. And then we also have the date range component, which is actually unique to Angular right now. So the date range component is just a DatePicker to start the beginning of your selection, and then a DatePicker at the end. You can select across them in order to be able to get a full range of dates.
Cool. And Alyssa will be talking about, I guess, the other stuff here. What are we doing in React?
So on the React side, I can happily announce that with the R2 release, we officially are in Vue 1.0. Actually, as of today, we have 1.0.1, so we have a couple of bug fixes we took care of. But what that just means is that people have been using the native React components since day 1 in January. But we continue to kind of build them out. And generally, we say that something is ready for prime time when we've added enough features and functionality. So our grid now has a lot of functionality built into it, which generally is what a lot of people want to use our components for. Our form components have been fleshed out. We added the data visualization library, so a lot of our charts are in there.
Great, big fan of those. So.
Yeah, it's huge. Alongside with PDF and Excel exportation and a couple of other items that we kind of consider critical. So yeah, we're now in Vue 1.0, so that's fantastic.
And with Vue, I guess some smaller amounts of updates, but still significant.
Yes, Vue has the benefit of working with jQuery kind of as a core library, right? We're basing our Vue components off of jQuery right now, and that just means that you have the robustness of the jQuery library brought over to Vue, and that includes any updates that we're adding in there as well.
All right, great. Well, Carl's going to join us later on in the webinar here and talk about the roadmap. But for now, Tara?
Well, before Carl leaves, we have a good question from the Hey Kendo UI hashtag from Mark Mettinger. And I think it's good when we talk about React, because he's basically saying, I want to switch to React, but is there documentation on how to switch from jQuery to React components? And I think that ties in with our React wrappers to help people switch over.
Yeah, so that's a great topic, actually, to discuss. So if you haven't looked into what we've done on React, we originally wrapped around our jQuery components to be able to offer the whole breadth of components for all React developers while we're building out the native library. So you'll be able to see on the page that we have kind of sets of both the what we call the React components and then the wrapped components. So for people that are migrating over, first of all, you can take a look at the grid and all the native components, and you can see that they offer a lot of similar pieces of functionality. But if you're missing a component, if there's something that quite isn't there yet, you can work with the wrappers, and then you have the benefit of knowing the full API already. So when you migrate over, you're using React, you're developing with the components in a React-like way, but you're just leaning on all that knowledge that you already have. So it makes the transition a little bit easier if you're already working with our jQuery components.
Great question.
Hope that works for you, Mark.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, please continue to send in your questions. We'll make sure we try and answer them. And
perfect.
Thanks a lot, Carl.
Yeah,
and let's move on to now some other aspects. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the conversational UI aspects that Carl alluded to earlier. So if you've been watching some of the previous webinars or you're here at Progress Next in Boston, we've been talking a lot about conversational UI in this release. What this is are a set of UI controls that you can use to support building out chatbots that are framework agnostic. So what this means is that there's a lot of chatbot frameworks that are out there from a variety of providers such as Microsoft, Google, Facebook, etc. And what we're doing is we're providing the building blocks upon which you can start building out chatbots. So we support basically all the major frameworks that are out there, and we provide a consistent design time experience that you can use in Kendo UI to build these things out. It's important to note that this also goes to some of our other products available in DevCraft. So whether you're building web, desktop, or mobile applications, you can build these out very quickly and easily. So what better way to show this off than through a demo? So I'm going to go ahead and jump over into my browser here. And I've got a sort of environment here that is showing some of the basic primitives of building out the chatbot. So first things first is we've got a new widget type called Kendo Chat. And so what this will do is we'll actually just build out this dialog here that you can see. And it's basically the building blocks of a chatbot application. All the plumbing is available to you, and as we go through this, you'll see that we can go ahead and start building out other aspects of it. But essentially what we have here is a frame or context for building out a chatbot. Moving on to another demo here, I'll go ahead and take a look at how we can respond to the various events that are present within a chatbot. So as you interact with a chatbot through this conversational UI we have in Kendo UI, what you can do is respond to different events. So for example, if a message is posted to the chatbot, I can go ahead and log that to the console if I wanted, for example. And you can see some of the messages that are being prompted into the console.log statement. So there's a variety of actions that you can conduct, like sending message when a user starts typing, when a user is finished typing, etc. And these are good events to handle when integrating within a chatbot-like environment. The third example I would like to show is one where you're rendering messages back to the user. So using this example again, what we see here is you can create different types of profiles. So when you post a message to the Kendo Chat widget, what you're effectively doing is doing it using a user context. So I can send a message like good day, and then Tara can respond with hello, Alyssa can respond with hello, and then Carl can respond with a different type of response. So he can provide other types of response that are beyond text. So oftentimes with chatbots, you'll see things like options or attachments that give you the ability of presenting cards. These are good in the case where you're building out a chatbot that's presenting options. And I'll show you an example of that in a second. But what I wanted to show you here is basically how easy it is to render these things out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go down, and you'll notice here I have a type called render attachments off the chat object. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and comment out Control K. Nope, not you. I'll just take this one out for now, and we'll go ahead and uncomment out this one. Oops. If my typing would work. There we go. So one of the options that I can present here are what are called suggested actions. So here I can go ahead and choose from one of the two options that are presented here. If I wanted to, though, I could also present these as a set of attachments. So you can present this as a carousel. So as you see here, as I scroll, I've got options available to me, and I can pick one of these options if I wanted to. I can also present this as a list. Now, kind of fleshing this out a little bit more concretely, we can go to one of the demos that we provide up on demos.telerik.com. If you haven't seen this, this should be your homepage. If not, make it a bookmark. Here's another example that interfaces with a variety of chatbot services that are available to you in the cloud. So for example, I'm using this chatbot here to request an insurance quote. So I can go ahead and say, I want to get a quote, and then you can see we're presented here with a list of options as attachments. These are some of the building blocks you see available in the chat widget. So I can get details for a quote. I can tell other options here to the chatbot if I wish, and then I can specify other options. Again, that's one scenario in the case of insurance. There are other ones as well. So for example, here's a chatbot that uses the context of travel. So if I wanted to, I could create like a family type of vacation. When do I want to start my vacation, for example? I can present different options going forward if I wish. So these and other options are available to me through the chat widget that we provide as part of the conversational UI piece in not only Kendo UI for jQuery, but also for Angular, Vue, and React as well. Looking at some of the other options or updates we have to Kendo UI for jQuery. In fact, let me jump back to my slides and we'll take a look at some of those here. So Carl mentioned some of these before. I'll just briefly highlight them here. Talked about the conversational UI piece. We have our new DropDownTree widget that's available, as well as support for hierarchical data for the OData v4 protocol. Let me show you some examples here. So jumping back here, you can see this is our new DropDownTree widget available to us. I can go ahead and select an item. And you'll notice that when I do that, I'm presented with a context that is a tree view underneath. This can be customized, so I can go ahead and denote whether I want checkboxes as an alternative. So I can go ahead and select, say, these items here. And you can see how that gives me a nice sort of user experience going forward. I can also do a variety of other options as well. I can do client-side filtering if I wanted to. So if I wanted to, I could type in here the letter F, and it will show me all options that match that criteria. So these and other options are now available to me in this widget, and going forward should provide you with a really powerful context in your applications. Taking a look at some other options here, you can see that we've updated some other aspects like the grid and the tree list, etc. The tree list now we have the ability to bind to our v4 protocol of OData. So here as an example, I've got a tree list that's bound to data. And for every subsequent request, when I expand on the chevron, you'll see a request being sent across the wire. I'll go ahead and bring up Chrome DevTools here. And if I hover over to the Network tab, you'll see that when I go ahead and expand this view here, you can see that a request has been sent across the wire using that protocol. And if we go ahead and scroll over to the right here, there is my request over OData v4. If I go ahead and look at how this is configured, this is all piped in through the data source. So looking down here, this is the sort of way that you work with Kendo UI data source type objects. You specify the type, and in this case it's OData v4, and you simply just wire up the transport protocols as you would any other type of data source bound endpoint. So you specify a read operation, you can specify other ones as well, along with a schema, and you're done. So these and other options are available to you now through this protocol support, which is great. Lastly, I want to show you an option here, which is something that we're working on, and we've provided an example for building out Electron-based applications. So some of you may be familiar with this demonstration. This is the Northwind database that you've never seen before. This is hosted within an Electron application. Electron is a framework from GitHub that allows you to build desktop applications for Windows and Mac using web technologies. In this scenario, we're using Kendo UI to display a desktop application that renders out the Northwind database. You can see here I have all the various types of things that I have in widgets with Kendo UI, things like the scheduler, the grid, etc. But it's all hosted and contained within this Electron app. So you'll find the source for this up on GitHub using the Telerik repository. And you can go ahead and look at this as an option if you're considering it for building desktop applications going forward. So these and other updates are available now to you through Kendo UI for jQuery. And it turns out to be pretty powerful stuff. Let me go ahead and take a second here and see if we have any questions that have come in through the Q&A pane. And I'll invite some of my co-hosts here to come up and see if we can answer any questions. And in the meantime, we'll turn things over. A gentleman saying that he's making that our homepage now. There's a question here that says, what about Chatbot for mortgage industry? Well, the reality is for chatbots, we're really not protocol specific. We're agnostic to all the various providers that are out there. So if you want, we've had questions about this for, I want to do one for WhatsApp, I want to do one for Alexa, or I want to do one for whatever it is. Where those are all supported because we don't dictate or basically define any predefined framework in use. You can use Microsoft's bot framework, you can use Dialogflow, you can use any other type of bot framework out there. We just provide the infrastructure for building out the UI, and then at the end of the day, you just simply do post message to interpret calls and then send them off to remote endpoints if you want to interpret them. So that's a great question. Another question here is, does the chatbot have access to emojis? Yeah, you can definitely put emojis in there if you wish. If that's your thing, that's great.
Was that Tara?
That might have been Tara. No, that wasn't Tara. Taking a look at some other questions. We've got some other ones here. Are the toolbar menu tooltip for Angular different from those for jQuery, or is it just a matter of getting Angular cut up. There's a little bit of that. I mean, some of these are unique, which Carl mentioned before, but these are native, right? They're no longer wrappers around the jQuery widgets themselves. So what that means is they're going to use all the isms available within Angular, making them truly native components for Angular itself. All right, so some great questions there. Let's go ahead and turn things over to Alyssa, and she's going to go ahead and show us what's new in Kendo UI for Angular. So Alyssa, over to you.
Hey, alrighty. So we're gonna go and get my slides going. I think we're good to go. So yes, as I said earlier, I'm the Angular developer advocate for Kendo UI. And I want to go over some of the really cool things. I know Carl touched on them, but I have some slides to show, some visuals. So we're going to hit up the goodies. So yes, that is me in a nutshell. I'm on the Twitters at Alyssa Nykel. So new goodies for Kendo UI. So full support of Angular 6, like Carl said, and I'm going to go into what that means for you specifically. Full support of material theme, sample apps, which we'll touch on, a couple grid updates, and then these fancy new components that we're going to have time to show. So Angular 6 support. If you have yet to update an app to Angular 6, it's a little bit different than 4 to 5, or of course the legendary 1 to 2. So Angular 6, for us, I went ahead and wrote a blog post about everything that's new in Angular 6. And inside that blog post, I have a link to ngconf. There's a couple of talks that Brad Green and some of the other people from the team really go into what Angular 6 encompasses and also beyond that, like the Ivy renderer. But as far as Kendo UI is concerned, to get you and your components up to date, you need to go ahead and use the npm check updates package. And so you will need to install that. And I know that there is a global bug right now with npm. So the way that I got around that, of course, was just not to use the -g and install it per each instance that you need. And then you'll need to go ahead and use the npm check updates, and this is it on the npm site, to list out and update your progress dependencies, which is super easy. And then also, as Carl mentioned, one of the big humps was to update RxJS. So for your Kendo components, you're going to need to install the RxJS compat. And that's literally this super simple line. I want to lastly mention, that was covering the Kendo side of things, but as far as updating your apps, go to angular.io. They have an update.angular.io, and this is a guide that's going to help you. You tell, I can actually click on this link and take us into it. So you'll say what version you're going to. Sometimes, depending on the version that you're going to or from, it will ask you specific questions, and then you say, show me the update, and it'll literally have a checklist, as you see here, of things that you need to do before you can use the CLI's new ng update command. But yes, so back into the slides. So super handy, update.angular.io, go ahead and use that. But the next thing that I wanted to touch on was material theme support. So as with all things, npm install material theme, super simple, showing my terminal here where I grabbed one of my Angular projects with Kendo and I'm installing the material theme. It's pretty quick. And then you need to go into your angular.json file and add it into the styles, which, of course, before 6 was released, is your .angular-cli file. So yes, here's me in my VS Code doing that. And you can see where I am highlighting, that's the Kendo theme material that I'm pointing to, the CSS file. So I had a little demo app that had a Kendo form in it, and this is with our default theme, and then after I installed it, that's with the material theme. So super simple, just a couple lines in your terminal, but we now support it, and it was really exciting. PWA sample app and Electron sample app. Did you get into these in detail?
I showed the Electron app there.
Okay, so. Okay. So we have, I want to go and show on our docs. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. There we go. So on the Kendo UI Components doc page, if you scroll down to the common features under integrations, you'll see that we have a link that talks about using progressive web applications. So this is talking about the app that we have, which it will soon be in Angular 6, but it's basically Kendo and Angular as a PWA, and it's a great sample app to go ahead and check out, for what does that look like, or to even use as a seed application. So you can read through the overview, and there's a GitHub link on here as well. And then, of course, John talked about the Electron app that we have, which you can get to if we go back to that same components page. If you scroll all the way to the bottom in our project setup, we have the using with Electron. And Carl actually showed me this yesterday, which I was like, what? Super cool. In your URL, if you go to kendo-angular-ui and you add on the -develop, it'll take you to essentially the develop version of the docs for our develop branch, which has the latest and greatest. And so this is a really cool place. As soon as something's on develop, it'll be on the docs here. So yeah, definitely check that out.
That's great.
I know, I was like, what? This is so cool. Yeah. So yeah, those are the two sample apps that we have right now that we wanted to highlight. The next cool thing, we have a couple grid updates. The first one being the menu update. So the grid enables you now to have a menu at the top that has quick actions where you can put little buttons. And what do I mean by that? Well, you can have things like sort order, filter, toggle lock columns, and you can also add custom actions. So if I go back, I want to, oops, there we go. So at the very top of this, you can see now, I don't know if you actually can see my mouse, but at the top of the grid, you can see how we have the menu at the top with the ability to do all of those actions, which is super exciting. The second thing is the loading indicator now. So when you're grabbing data from an API, instead of seeing blankness or nothingness, you see the little loader that's like, hang on, I'm grabbing it. So the two new Kendo UI Angular grid updates, love it. So now we get into the fun components that we have. And the first one is the toolbar component. So yes, the Kendo UI toolbar represents graphical elements for holding button elements, enables users to easily structure and access them. So you get to use the ng-add, which is the CLI, Angular CLI 6, one of their newest commands. And it's essentially replacing npm install and then going and putting it into your project. You just run ng-add and it does it for you. And so the toolbar allows you to use this awesome list of things: the buttons, toggle buttons, button groups, split buttons, drop-down buttons, and separator. So if I go ahead and click on my little link here and take us into our docs, you can see, yeah, this is big enough. Okay, so you can see all of these buttons that I just talked about with the drop downs, and this is the awesome, fancy new toolbar that we are offering. So go into there. And I love that. That was something I was really excited to see, that as soon as Angular 6 dropped, not only do we have support for it, but with our new components that we're offering, you get to use ng-add. And I believe Carl said that you can use ng-add on all our components now. So super excited. Yeah, he's totally giving me the head nod on the side. So yes, so not all of our docs are up to date. You'll still see npm install on some of the components, but go ahead and give ng-add a try, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. The next one is the menu component. It's brand spanking new, which displays hierarchical. I can't even say that word. Is
hierarchical.
Hierarchical. Yeah. See, it's like a for me. Data as multi-level menu. So of course, like I said, you can use ng-add to add it into your project, and it's going to offer so many things like data binding, items, vertical menu, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things I wanted to highlight here was, we don't have time to get into all the features, but something that I'm really passionate about and I was so happy to find since I'm relatively new to the team was how much they care about accessibility and how all of the components actually have docs on accessibility and how to actually utilize that with each one. And I just was so happy about that. Let me click on this and we're going to go into, oh bother. Did I? Oh, I don't think I linked it up right. Menu component. Do I have it on the next slide? Oh, I do. Okay. That was not a real link. Forgive me. Okay. So utilizing the menu component, I've got this to show you that inside of the component, it's literally just kendo-menu, and you can pass it items. And then inside of your class, you literally list out the items. And so here is what the component menu component looks like with the drop downs, and how easy was that to actually include it, and it's already working. Our next fun one is the tooltip component. Tooltip features, yes. So the tooltip is, if you've never used a tooltip in your life, the little pop-ups whenever you hover over an element and it gives you additional info. And so our tooltip, of course, you can use ng-add to add it into your project. And then this is an example of what our tooltip looks like on a map. However, you might be asking yourself, can I just hover over dots on a map for my tooltip? And of course not. We offer it on any element. And so if you look into, you're like, well, how do I attach that to an element? Well, you'll literally add a filter attribute. And you say something like, I'm going to attach this to something with a button that has a class of awesome submit. And that's literally going to match to a button that has that class. So I love how easy our tooltip component is to use, and check out our docs for examples on that and how to customize it. The last one, which is actually new as of our R2 release, the date range component. All of these are, I don't know, I just said that. This one's new, the other ones aren't new. Super special. The date range component is literally what it sounds like. It has a start and an end date, and this is a GIF of me clicking into it. So it's a container for holding the start and end date. So if you click on the start, it'll offer a pop-up, and then you can select your start and end date and click anywhere to get out of it, and it's pre-populating those fields. So if I go into our docs, you can play with it live, of course, on our docs, but I just love how easy these things are to use and play with, modify, customize. So yes, that is our date range component. I wanted to see if I had any other goodies to mention. I think that is all I have right now. Do you want me to pass it back to you, or should we bring in Tara?
Yeah, we'll take some questions, actually. So one question here, and Carl, feel free to answer some questions if you wish. It says here, if I want to use the new features of Kendo UI for Angular, do I need to upgrade my Angular 5 application to Angular 6?
So we support Angular, a couple different versions of it right now, actually. So you don't necessarily need to upgrade to the latest and greatest just to be able to take advantage of a brand new component. Okay. We will make a note of that whenever something might need a newer version. And we've kind of tried to follow what the Angular team's doing with that kind of support as well. So you'll continue to see that we have a couple of versions of Angular that we support across all components.
Yeah, I've noticed that on the docs, how it'll have like ng-add, but if you're not there yet, here's the old way of adding it, like npm installing it and then including it in the Angular-CLI JSON. So they are very good about that.
Another question here is, can you use Kendo material alongside with the material components? I guess they're referring to,
the new material theme that we have across Angular, React, and very soon jQuery, and then MVC and Core, and all the products that are based on the jQuery component, so Vue as well. But yes, the idea there is we're all following material design as the overall design language, so as long as all the libraries are following along with what you're supposed to do from a UI perspective, you should be able to use them side by side.
All right, great. Take a look at some other questions here. Is the Bootstrap theme supported? I guess they're referring to the demos that you were showing with Kendo UI for Angular, but I think
we have across the board. We support actually. We've had a Bootstrap v3 and lower theme for quite some time, but we also have a specific v4 edition as well. And the reason that we kind of moved over is because a lot of changes happened to Bootstrap itself, and then also that's a part of our new SaaS-based themes, which are themes that we're sharing across all of the flavors of Kendo UI. So Vue, jQuery, React, Angular, they all have these SaaS-based libraries, which are a little bit easier to customize and tweak. And Bootstrap v4 happens to be one of them.
We'll take a couple more questions here. Is it possible, any new updates about the exported PDF and Excel on Kendo Grid for Angular 6? I think we're just supporting basically the export capabilities.
Yep, exactly. So the general framework item is there, so it's not just for the grid. It's integrated into the grid both on the React and Angular, and of course jQuery on all those sides. But the newer libraries with Angular and React, they support PDF and Excel exportation specifically of the grid. Or if you just want to work with generic HTML and export that, or even create your own Excel files in JavaScript, you can do so.
Last question, I guess, and then we'll move on. Like ng-add, which you were showing earlier, is there ng-remove to components? Is that something that we offer?
So I actually talked to, so the Angular CLI used to be based on the Ember CLI, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Tara, but didn't the Ember CLI used to or still has a remove command, I think?
I don't know
Oh, sorry, she doesn't know Ember. I assume you know all frameworks. So I believe it had a remove command, and I was asking Mike, who's on the CLI team, and I was like, hey, I want to remove this. What's up with that? But as of, I think, the latest CLI version, they are completely off of the base code that they had used. And so they don't have that command anymore. They actually took it out. So it would be based on if it exists in the CLI, which it does not.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And just a piece of feedback, I guess we'll get to this when we talk about the roadmap. There's a comment more than a question. It says, I referred to the scheduler in jQuery. It's pretty cool, but I wish I could have it for Kendo for Angular as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in the roadmap section.
Perfect.
See what we can talk about coming up.
Thanks, Carl.
Yeah,
Thanks, Alyssa.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to invite Tara now on stage to talk a little bit about what's new with Kendo UI for React. So, Tara, I'll switch over to you.
Hello, everybody. So we just did a release for Kendo UI that Carl was talking about. And I know that a lot of people that are using React know that we actually had components for the React library at the beginning of this year, but we are sticklers. We really wanted to make sure that it was a really great release. We had components that would make your React applications extremely robust and awesome, and had all of the documentation and support that you would need for this library. So that's why we waited this long to give the official major release. So we are very excited about that. And I want to cover just what we're going to be talking about a little bit, but I want to tell you what we have now for React. And so that means we have the conversational UI that John talked about a bit. We have new native components that we'll delve into right now, including the autocomplete, ComboBox, chart, DatePicker, and Switch. And then just in general, for this framework, we have some really great features now where you can do a PDF export, an Excel export, and you can do these specifically for the grid as well. And we have localization. So some other things that we aren't going to cover in depth today are some really great new features for the grid, because we know that that's your favorite component. So many people ask us about the grid because we give you the ability to just do so much with the grid. And so now we want to make sure that you can do even more because we like you.
Yeah,
you know?
why not?
We want to help you out.
Sure.
So we won't be covering that as much, but we have things where you can like resize the columns and do in-cell editing and just a ton more with the grid that I highly recommend checking out. And I'm sure we'll do more content on the grid specifically. I just gave myself more work.
Nah,
I don't know how I did that. And then as Alyssa and Carl had talked about with the material theme support, again, we have that Bootstrap support theming, our default theming, and we let you make custom themes as you need them to be applied among all of the components. We also have new sample progressive web apps. And again, just to I know that we always hear about PWAs and we say PWAs, some people say PWAs, but we won't talk about that. But again, progressive web apps are basically a way to take your web apps that already exist and make them more re-engaging by doing push notifications and more immersive by doing full screen views on mobile devices. And all that is basically is bringing in some JavaScript and new web technologies and metadata with a manifest.json file. We do have a bunch of documentations with some YouTube videos and different blog posts we have talking more about Kendo UI and PWAs. So check out these sample PWAs and their repos to help you build really great progressive web apps with Kendo and React. Let's go in further. So the first thing we want to talk about is the chart component. We're really excited about this. We had this for Vue, for Angular, so we're really excited to have it for React. And we did a lot with our chart components too, because we know that data visualizations, people use them all the time.
Yep.
And I remember I used to work with D3 to do visualizations, and it was quite a rigorous process to get so much information into there. So we wanted to make it as simple as possible, but also very customizable. So we let you work with your axes, like Alyssa was talking about, your tooltip, format what users see when they scroll over different things, work with your selections, and we give you a ton of different series types. So my three favorite I like to talk about are donut and pie and waterfalls. because those are nice.
Yep.
But then we also have scatter and funnel, plot and bullet, tons of things that really let you manipulate and showcase your data the most effective way possible for your users. And you can do a lot of with the data binding in our charts. And as well as one thing I thought was interesting that I played around with was the planning and zooming. So you can really get the interactions that you want for your users. And we also now let you export them with PDF, SVG, and more. So we had a lot of people asking about that. We were lucky enough to attend React Europe lately. And one of the things that people were asking us is to see if our charts came in SVG. And guess what? They do.
Yep. It's good stuff.
It is. So we're really excited about the charts. Again, another thing I hope you go in and check out. So we have these next few ones, the ComboBox and autocomplete. They are these chart components. Nope.
Form components.
Hey, that. So what we talked about a lot yesterday when we talked to people about these components is the fact that all of us use forms all the time. And it's like you have to make a lot of forms.
Yep.
But you want to make them specific enough so that your users don't feel agitated by your forms, don't get confused about what they're supposed to fill out. So we try to give you a lot of things for your forms, like these combo boxes and the autocompletes, that let you customize them and put a lot of action into what's going on in your form. So I just want to go over some of the things, because there's a lot that you can work with for the combo box and such. So with ComboBox, you can do your data binding and your value binding. You can actually put custom values inside of these combo boxes, as well as do filtering and suggestions as people go into your dropdown. One thing that I think is extremely exciting, I don't know if you have listed or seen long lists in dropdowns.
Yep.
So
countries.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Classic one.
All of the different cities in one state.
Yep.
You know, it's like a lot of things that a lot of times you see these drop-down lists that seem to go on forever. So are you loading all of that data? Well, we make sure that with virtual scrolling, just what is being visible on the page is what is being loaded and rendered. And that way you're able to give your users a better experience with these really long lists that we have to do. And I know that one thing that matters a lot to everyone on the team is accessibility for our components. So that's why we make sure that this comes built in our component libraries, all kinds of things like YARIA, W3C compliance, and keyboard navigation, which is really great for accessibility, and also total nerds that use Vim and don't like to touch their mouse.
Yep.
I don't know who would ever be like that. So I really love the keyboard navigation in our components. And we also have globalization, which is very exciting. And this basically translates the component messages to the specific culture and locale where the component is being loaded. So all of these things also apply to our autocomplete. Again, with the data and value binding and the filtering and suggestions. But one thing I want to mention with our styling, so I'm not good at CSS.
Who is?
I had people ask me about CSS yesterday, and I was like, oh no. This is no excuse, but I did start out back end. And so like getting into the CSS world, thankfully we have Alyssa to help us out with stuff like that as well. But I really love our theming, because not only do we get the great color schemes right out of the box and everything that we can rely on with our default and Bootstrap and Material, but we get these like UX interactions that basically happen inside of our components that we don't have to do anything to make that happen. Yep. And like really nice smooth animation transitions like you will see in the autocomplete and such. So this one I think is very exciting, because on the road I talk to a lot of developers who have to do date pickers. And just the point of making them look nice is hard enough, let alone all the logic inside of date pickers. So we did a lot with our date pickers to make it really nice and smooth and give you a lot of functionality out of it. We did the change date format. So you can go through and manipulate how you want the dates to show up really easily, customize it for your audience. You can add the week number column, which is interesting, especially for like business and tax and like being, adulting. But But then you can also choose date ranges. The keyboard navigation, I'm hoping to demo for you right after this because it's really interesting. And again, we have that really smooth UX that takes you through the animations and makes the user feel like, okay, this is smooth and nice. So I will demo that, but before I do, I want to talk about the switch component. And I know that people see the switch component and they're like, oh yeah, cool, a switch. But I think it is a very handy component that may get overlooked sometimes. I actually use this as a light switch in an IoT app that I built with the Hue Philips Light system. And it just makes sense because you have a binary answer. So instead of doing like a yes or no drop down, or maybe doing a radio button, you have this nice switch, and you can customize the labels to whatever you want it to be, true, false, yes, no, which just kind of helps with just the feeling of filling out a form. So don't disregard the switch. It also has keyboard navigation, which is nice. So I would like to jump into a little quick demo of the DatePicker. Let's see if I could just do this and it works. Would you look at that? So here we are on our documentation for Kendo UI for React. And I am a big fan of everything that we have available inside of our documentation. And Alyssa was asking the crowd yesterday how many people had actually seen our documentation, and not many had. So I want to highly recommend checking it out because it will really help guide you through how to use the components, what it looks like, and what it feels like for your users. Because not only do we have this example here, we also have the source code. So if you, we'll look at the source code real quick, just so you can see, right here is where the DatePicker is coming in. Really complicated, practically 3 lines of code, right? But what you get out of those 3 lines of code is this great experience where you can go through here and just sift through where you want the dates to be picked up. And then one thing that I like a lot is you can actually go in and type as well, and then it will open it to that date in the calendar. But one thing that's really great is as you're doing the keyboard navigation, the input actually understands, maybe.
It's on a key binding for control, I think, as well.
Oh, so, great.
Yeah. That's all right. You're on a Mac, it's different.
What am I supposed to do on a Mac?
Yeah, that's right.
So I'll just tell you, as you go through and you scroll through the numbers, it knows how many months are in, or how many days are in that month, and will switch to the next month because it has that logic built into that keyboard navigation. So you have that available just right out of the box with those 3 lines of code that we saw right there.
That's a really good point about the docs. I mean, we do make a really good effort of documenting everything. We've got plunkers available for you to go check out and really poke the bits, so to speak. So make sure to go check that out.
Yes, it's very fun. And it helps you solve a lot of questions, and there's APIs that are attached to all of the components. So sometimes, especially even when I was coding out components, there were things that I didn't even realize, like I could change that too. So you can get very carried away with it. That's true. So I do want to also let people know that I have a video series. I'm doing the same gesture. I guess I do that gesture a lot. I do have a video series that walks you through using the Kendo UI components for React to build a progressive web app. And we use Create React App, which is a scaffolding library that builds out a project for you. And it shows you how to install, import, and integrate our components very easily. And I highly recommend checking it out. And then I want to move on to Vue.js. Do you want to take time for questions?
We can do that, yeah. Let's just switch positions here. We'll just bring up the Q&A pane, and I'll invite Carl up again.
Smoother.
That's fine. That's good. Let's take
Carl,
a look.
stop eating and come up here.
All right, so we have some other questions. One question is, will the date format change automatically based on region/language computer settings? So this one's tough. I thought about this a little bit. We had this question yesterday at Progress Next where we're here, and a gentleman in the audience asked us this. The issue of locale, language, etc. is a tricky one, especially when it comes to the web, components, etc. If you think about it, there's a variety of ways in which it can get controlled. You can do it on the function level, the component level, the app level, the browser level, even on the server level, you can dictate a variety of locale quantities. So I guess the answer to this is you can automatically change it. There's a library we have in Kendo UI for React, is that right?
Yep, both, well, actually across all the flavors, right?
Yep.
But Angular and React especially, they have an internationalization package that can help out with this, just from either a component level or overall application level, which is a big deal for React since it's so new. We were able to squeeze that in for this particular release, so going forward you can work with that as well.
All right, perfect. Another question here is, when will the quick actions be added to the React grid like it is with jQuery and Angular? Quick actions, I think, are
like editing and such?
I'm wondering if that's just some of the interactivity elements, like maybe in-cell editing, or
so we do have in-cell editing with this release, which is very exciting. As well as, I mean, like grouping, filtering. Would that be?
Yeah, that's all in there. Grouping was added, so that's a big deal. For some of the other features, I mean, I can take this and think about it as a generic. When will feature X be ready in the grid, right? And we're trying to be as transparent as possible on the roadmap pages. So each of the individual flavors, that I'll call them, they have their own roadmap pages where we try to say this is what we're working on across the next couple of months. And when it comes to the grid, I know it's a very popular component. We've added a ton of other functionality that we're going to address with the upcoming release, but if something's missing, definitely let us know, and we can try to see if we can provide a better timeline.
Cool.
And just because I have it in front of me, some of the things that we added for the grid in this release are grouping, column resizing and reordering, in-cell editing, and filter customizations, just to name a few.
Great. Another question here, are the SAS-based themes still in beta, as TimePicker shows on demo pages?
No, they're all fully released, so if we have a beta note somewhere, we'll have to go in and figure out why we added that in.
All right. Thanks a lot. We'll give the stage back now to Tara and talk about Kendo UI for Vue. Go ahead.
Awesome. So moving on, we will quickly talk about Vue. So at the beginning of the year, we decided to create a library for Vue using our wrappers. One thing that I always like to remind people is that our libraries for Angular and for React were built from the ground up, specifically for those frameworks, so that you could work with them seamlessly. And what we do with Vue.js is use our wrappers, but that means that you have all of the components that you have through jQuery, you're able to use with your Vue libraries. But we also have these ones that are specifically for Vue.js. So we are very excited for the things that we're bringing new to Vue with this release. Vue is one of, I shouldn't be biased, but Vue is one of my favorites.
Hey, that's all right.
I like Vue. And if you haven't heard of Vue Vixens, definitely check out Vue Vixens. Our coworker Jen Looper has started an amazing group called Vue Vixens. Check it out. So 3 things that we want to talk about for Vue today are, again, the conversational UI that is available for Vue. That John talked about earlier. If you're watching later on YouTube, just rewind again. And then we also now have support for Vuex. Vuex is it's a state management pattern and library. I always forget the pattern part. Pattern and library for Vue state management. So it's a really great tool to basically make sure it's a centralized store for all your components to make sure that state is handled in a reliable and predictable way. So it's very, very handy for Vue. So we're extremely excited that we are supporting that now. And one of the new components we have is the new DropDownTree. And I want to actually just go in right now and show you a demo for that. It'll be a nice quick demo. So the DropDownTree is basically an editor to help you manage your hierarchical data. And it's a tree-like structure, and it lets you do multiple selections with checkboxes and such, and you can do data binding with local data arrays or your remote data services. And it also gives you filtering. So I actually let me see if I can load up the checkboxes, because I like this one a lot. I should have loaded this up earlier.
That's all right. I'll show this one for the jQuery demo as well. So.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Did you show the checkboxes?
I did. That's okay. That's all right. You can show it again.
Okay, one more time. No, I'm just kidding. But I really like that functionality that you're able to, in one click, add everything so easily. And so while we're in Vue, though, I just want to show you inside of our documentation, we have a ton of components ready and available for Vue. So please go through and check these all out because there is a lot on there. And you can see through our roadmap here is listed up top, everything that we have coming, and keep up to date with as we make changes for Vue. So that is actually all I have for Vue today.
Great. Thanks a lot. I'll invite Carl back up on stage and we'll wrap things up. Thanks a lot.
I'll do my walk up.
There you go. All right. So again, if you've missed any of this, the good thing is we're going to be posting this up on YouTube. So make sure to subscribe to our channel, which is at youtube.com/Telerik. And what we'd like to do is wrap things up with some questions as well as talk a little bit about the roadmap. So we've just released R2.
Yep.
R3 is probably in the future somewhere. So,
yep.
And you guys are thinking what exactly? Like, what are some of the ideas you guys have got baking?
Well, you know, we cover a lot with Kendo UI, right? A lot of different frameworks and libraries. So we have to kind of look at each of the individual flavors as kind of serve their own roadmap, right? So a couple of big items that we've talked about and kind of alluded to a little bit in the question is on the Angular side, we're going to try to tackle the scheduler component.
Oh, great.
So this is a big component. It's definitely something that you know, we'll be focusing a lot on, but we'll be trying to reach feature parity with what we have in jQuery. Probably not for the initial release. You know, it'll be a set of features that we considered kind of crucial for a scheduler, but then we'll of course continue to add to that going forward. Yeah,
I think traditionally in the past we've introduced components and they've been in preview sometimes, and we're like, look, kick the tires, see what it's like, and then in the subsequent release, we say, okay, it's ready to go.
Exactly, exactly. So we're doing the same thing here. Then on the React side, a big thing for us is continue with the grid development, right? Okay. As Tara mentioned, as we already mentioned, I think all of us, the grid's one of the most popular components, so we'll continue to kind of expand that alongside with some of the other components that we haven't quite added in there. So you'll see some of our gauges. Yep. We have a couple of chart types that are still remaining that we'll be adding in as well. So, and then some other form elements that we might have missed out on so far. So continue to work on the main component while supporting it with all these other components that exist. And if people have feedback to, you know, maybe hopefully they could probably sneak in something into the roadmap, where would be the best place for them to go? So if you go to feedback.telerik.com, that has everything that you need in terms of feedback portals for Kendo UI and all the other products. And while it might seem like that is a response that a lot of people get, I check that almost daily. So you can go in there, vote, comment, and if you don't see a particular feature that has been requested before, feel free to submit it. You know, sometimes it has to be the first person has to kick it off, and then other people go in and vote. Yeah, he's not kidding, folks. I mean, these guys look at those the feedback that the customers you guys send in, and that largely dictates kind of what they're going to plan for in the next release. Yeah, it does. So imagine that. So. Yeah. All right, cool. So we're going to answer a few questions. In the meantime, if you want to check out any of our writing related to this, you can go check out our website as well as our blog site. This is a great resource for a lot of articles that Tara and Alyssa and myself have written, which is at blogs.telerik.com. And we'd like to thank you, and now we'd like to answer some questions. So we're going to go back in the Q&A pane here, and hopefully Carl will indulge us with some of his insights. Yeah, perfect. So look at my phone as well on Twitter, so we'll be dual wielding questions. All right, here. There we go. So in the data range, I guess the date range picker, can I leave the date empty to pick today's date? I don't know if that's. I think by default it assumes today's date off the browser. Yeah. So when you pop in, it generally has that a little bit highlighted. Yep. You can remove that if you want to. It's just some CSS that we're applying. Okay. But if you wanted to have that automatically have a default kind of automatically pick that day, you could work with the API to set that up. Another question here: does the new date picker have built-in validation? For example, can a user type in an invalid date and/or characters? We tend to work within any of our date pickers, and every one of our pickers, we have validation built in. And you also have a validation framework across all of Kendo UI. So, exactly. So if it's not enabled, that's a good question that I just haven't done myself. But if for some reason it's not enabled by default, you can just go in. Never trust your users. Option. Yeah, never trust user input. That's the one thing. Let's see here. As Vue continues to grow in popularity, does the demand for Kendo UI for Vue compare to that of Angular and React? I guess it's one of those things, like, there's no way for us to predict, I guess, the popularity of where these things are going to go, but we're just kind of, you know, putting our
or finger up to the wind and figuring out where people want to be. So.
Yep, and this is actually similar to a question that we had from Twitter as well, asking if we see one of the frameworks, I guess the kind of 3 that we're targeting now alongside with jQuery, what will be the next biggest framework? And I think that's what everybody's wondering.
Sure.
JavaScript fatigue is a real thing, and I know we're all dealing with all these frameworks that pop up here and there. We don't necessarily see one being the clear winner or whatever we want to say, right? But these are the frameworks that we're dealing with today, and Vue, continues to gain in popularity, so it's definitely an important framework for us.
All right, we have one last question we'll answer here. Is there a focus on a grid component in the development group? Grid seems to be the most used component. I guess this is for Angular. That's already existing today, right?
Yeah.
So
Really, a lot of these libraries are developed initially with the grid, and then from there we add a lot of supplemental components that kind of go into the overall UI library. So that's where we see a lot of form elements, and then once that's kind of ready, that's when we look into some of the other bigger niche components.
All right. Well, by the alarm, we're out of time. So thanks a lot, everyone. We really appreciate your time on behalf of Tara and Alyssa, who's running up on the stage, and Carl. I'm John. Thank you for having us on your computer there on the webinar, and make sure to check us out on YouTube and all that. So send us your questions, etc., feedback. But once again, thanks a lot for joining us.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Everyone.